sorry, we got here Andrew Wilson from the Crucible, and he's talking about how he relates to the red pill because he is a Orthodox Christian, but he also talks a lot of red pill talking points and kind of operates in that space. So let's hear his explanation.
The red pill.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts on the red pill itself?
So it's funny when you have debates on this. The red pill itself does not exist. What exists is an idea, a catalog idea, and you're using the red pill as a descriptor for this idea.
Okay.
That's all it is. So the idea, at least from my perspective of the red pill, is we want to know what is descriptively true before we make prescriptions for anything, right? So let's start with what is descriptively true. The red pill says men and women aren't equal. That was the first thing I saw. And I was like, okay, maybe there's something here. Maybe there's something good here, right?
Yeah.
Little pushback to egalitarianism.
Look at Myron, he looks so tense in there. He's like, what's he going to say, man? What's he going? You know what I mean? But yeah, he's right. This is, I hear this from Rollo. It sounds like Andrew also probably heard that from Rollo too, that it's just a descriptor. Most red pill guys in the space who all exist in that same ecosphere all do kind of agree on that because they all take their information from the same place. So they're all in kind of a collective hive mind where they all kind of collectively agree that, yeah, we're not offering any prescriptions. We're just describing things. Now, I would question the veracity of how true that is. I think there's plenty of self-evident prescriptions that evolve out of the red pill. And they want to say, we're not responsible for any prescriptions that come out of this. Well, it's like, if you give me a hammer, it's used for nails. It's not used for screws. So if you give me a hammer, it's innate to the nature of the hammer to use it towards nails. So there is a prescription inherent to a hammer. And the same is true with the red pill. There are inherent prescriptions to the red pill. And you notice this because they don't like to talk about specific subjects such as religion. That's probably why Myron is so tense in that frame right there, is because he really doesn't like addressing the fact that, hey, religion exists. Here's a prescription. Here's another alternative explanation of the world. And let's hear how Andrew navigates this.
They also make other claims, too. They make claims about what women are attracted to, what they're not attracted to, what men are looking for, what they're not looking for. They're trying to get into kind of the sociology of the pairing of men and women.
Yeah.
From my perspective, almost all of the descriptors of the red pill line up perfectly with Christian ethics. It's when you get into prescriptions that we start having troubles. So, for instance, I know you're infamous for this, right? But the have sex with 50 women thing, right?
Yeah.
Just so I make sure I don't get this position wrong, but I can give you like a counter example of what I'm saying.
Yeah, sure.
Can you lay your position on that out?
Yeah, I would like to. I'm not sure this is entirely true. I wouldn't concede this, that the red pill and the Christian set of ethics overlap completely on the metrics of descriptors. I don't think that's necessarily true. It depends on where you pull from in terms of Christianity. If you look at the Old Testament, he would be an Orthodox Christian. So there would be a lot of like quote unquote red pill stuff in the Old Testament, in the Bible, and in the old teachings of the church. Definitely not evangelical Protestants. If I was an evangelical Protestant, I would be kind of raging my fist at that guy. How dare you? The red pill treats women as objects and da-da-da. And most people don't even know that slavery was in the Bible, and there's entire scriptures about how you should treat slaves and how you should be nice to them and not whip them and beat them. And there's certain ethics around those kinds of things. So I can see what he's saying. But let's hear him out.
Why?
Yeah.
Okay, so we would agree, right, that the dating marketplace has changed.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Women have changed, right? They think they're equal to you, the egalitarian thing that we talked about before. So since the dating marketplace has changed significantly and women have more sexual experience now than ever before because they think they're men and they can have sex and have relationships just like men, etc., and be promiscuous and not deal with the same ramifications, what guys have to do is kind of go in and understand how women operate in today's day and age. And I think a good way to do that, right, obviously there's a multitude of ways, but one way to do it is obviously to have experience so that you're not getting into a relationship or a situation.
See, that's a prescription, though. I mean, I know it's a prescription. It's obviously a prescription. But I would generally counter this argument that you need experience to Well, okay, it's tricky. What kind of experience are you talking about? Are you talking about sexual experience? So the argument I think they're putting forward is you are going to be more attractive to a woman in the bedroom if you have experience in the bedroom. And this is true, but this only applies to secular people who are optimizing around the sexual experience in the bedroom, which is something I don't think is that critically important to optimize around. I don't think it's the same concept as sexual compatibility. You hear that term thrown around a lot by people in the red pill. Oh, you need to make sure we're sexually compatible, and you need experience. I don't think this is necessarily true. I think this is true if you're operating in a secular perspective where you're optimizing around sex. I don't think that's really how we should be optimizing our relationships, and I think I would say this is a secular perspective. So I don't know how Andrew's gonna relate to this. Maybe he'll say the same thing as me, but let's go.
With a woman and you're not aware of her nature and you don't know how to deal with it. I kind of like like to use the analogy all the time. If you got a boxing match, right, in 5 years, right, with a very good and skilled opponent, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to play video games the whole time, or are you going to train and get ready for the biggest fight of your life, which I look at as marriage, because
so it makes you worldly. Makes you worldly.
Yes.
Right? And I think we don't disagree that that's true.
Yeah.
The Christian ethics pushback to this would
Of course.
but wait, you want this is a requirement or something which is helpful to make you a high value man.
Yeah.
Well, this in turn would give this hoe value.
But I don't determine a guy's high valueness from having sex with a lot of girls. I think a man being deemed as high status or high value is from his effort and his merit that he develops on his own, and then the women are byproducts.
But he has experience now, and experience is going to help him be high value, right?
I wouldn't attribute him being, because there's guys that are high value that don't get girls. Like I wouldn't say like they're successful, they're smart.
This is a good point. I don't think Andrew and Myron are really connecting. But what Andrew's trying to say is that you're basically setting up a value system around experience, which is true. It's kind of what I was saying, where it's like it only really applies to secular people. And it's kind of the whole element of like, if you go and you do the red pill prescriptions of like, go work out and go get sexual experience and go learn game, and you do what the pickup artists do, you're playing into the dynamic of secularism, whereas you should be striving towards Christian ethics, which is what Andrew is probably trying to bring this back to, but Myron is just not, he doesn't operate in that field.
They're ambitious, etc., but they don't get girls.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they don't go out enough. Maybe they don't care to.
Oh, right. But they're more likely to get them if they want them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, they're in a better position.
Yeah.
They're because it's a byproduct. But my thing is, your value as a man is not attributed to the amount of girls that you have sex with. I just think it allows you to be a better test of character. You're better able to assess the character of women when you've dealt with them before, so that you don't get finessed out of the value that you created.
But wouldn't the entailment of that be that you're high value? Like the entailment of I have X amount of experience that helps me with my value. Like that's going to be a portion of that, and so kind of the rebuttal that we would have is we would say, okay, maybe
I just don't attribute like a man's sexual experience to him being high value. I think it helps him with.
I would disagree that you need sexual experience to establish a high value woman. I think that's kind of a cope that the degenerates of the red pill use to justify casual sex. They're saying, "Oh, I'm accruing experience. Now I know." Women do the same thing. They're like, "Oh, but now I know what you want, and you don't want to." Like, women will use the same argument in the red pill, and the guys will shut them down and say, "No, we want a pure woman." But then they go do the exact same thing, and they try to argue from the same perspective, which is, "Oh, I have experience. Now I can find out what a good woman is, and now I can impress her with my sexual experience." They do the exact same thing. Whereas I don't think I don't think you need sexual experience to know how women operate and how women are, first off. But two, that only applies to secular people. Meaning you only need these navigational tools if you're navigating amongst secular people. You should be navigating in a Christian framework in the first place. And now that's not obviously possible anymore, but you see what I'm saying, where it's playing into the dynamics of secularism by learning the rules of its game and then participating in the game that it offers, which doesn't work for anybody.
Assessing
A partner.
a partner.
Mm-hmm.
But him being high value is completely independent of having sex with a lot of girls. I think the women are a byproduct of his success.
Okay, so
That's my stance on
he is successful.
Yeah.
It's easier for him to get these chicks.
Yes.
Right.
And I think if he's going to go ahead and partake in women, he should have some experience, is what I think.
Gotcha.
Especially when he's higher value and he has a lot to lose. But I'm not going to sit. If I take two guys, right?
Mhm.
One guy is making, one guy is wildly successful, etc., and another guy's wildly successful. One has a partner count of 1,000, the other one has a partner count of 0. To me, they're still both high value. Just one chose to use his value to attract way more women than the other.
But would you make it a prescription then? Would you tell men you should do this? It's good for you to do this.
I think if you're going to go and be marriage-minded...
Am I the only one noticing how nervous Andrew looks? Like, you can hear the breaths in his mic every time he finishes a question. It's because he's not arguing against, like, a 20-year-old OnlyFans model that that he gets to bully ravenously. But I would say Myron's prescriptions are good if you're operating within a secular framework, but trying to operate in a secular framework is kind of pointless because you're just optimizing instant gratification. So, you know what I mean? It's kind of pointless in the end, but he's basically saying, here's how you navigate hoes. My perspective would be, why are you trying to navigate hoes? Why do you care? Why do you want to get a bunch of hoes? Why do you want to dance around and play toxic, manipulative, hold frame games with a bunch of hoes? It's a waste of time, in my perspective, right? Now, some guys, they don't really care about Christian ethics. They don't care about, building a family or having kids or being a father. They just want to bang hoes, right? So, fair enough. But I think once you get to a certain age, you realize, well, I want something actually sustainable, not just a rule book that only works for navigating a bunch of secularists. It's kind of a pointless game to play.
Try to find a girl to take seriously, you should have some experience.
Then that has to add to the value.
I don't think so, man.
I don't see how. If you're saying if you want this thing,
Yeah.
and this thing is to get married
Yeah.
to a high value woman, right? To somebody who you consider to be virtuous and good
Mm-hmm.
and this type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're saying that having sex with a multitude of partners is then going to up your chances of being able to do this thing, to accomplish this thing, then I don't see how it's not attributing to the value.
I completely... a man's value...
The real problem is Andrew just smuggled in the virtuous wife. Myron is not giving advice on how to pursue a virtuous wife. He never did, never was. You do not want to use this advice that Myron and the Red Pill gives to find a virtuous wife. This is how to navigate secularists. Now, it can be useful in that do you want to avoid secularists? Okay, well, here's what they do, right? So this is like learning the devil's game from the devil's position. Now, if you want to navigate demons, go ahead, but my perspective would be, why would you even try to engage with the secularist culture in the first place, unless you're trying to play Captain Convert-A-Hoe, right? So it doesn't really make sense. But yeah, Andrew's coming at this from a wife and virtuous woman perspective. Myron's coming at this from a value and sexual experience and sexual opportunity perspective. They have completely different value systems.
Him having sex, they're independent to me.
Okay.
I look at, like, you can be a virgin as a guy and still be a high value dude.
Yep.
Is how I look at it. I think the women are just a byproduct of your value.
He's saying that because he used to be a virgin, right? Little insight there. He wants to say that because it justifies his younger self. But yeah.
But it is a prescription that you would make?
If you're your prescription as far as the 50 girls.
Yeah.
Yes, but you can be high value and not take that prescription.
Right,
is my
but
point.
you must see some value then in prescribing it.
More, and the value is from protecting your value. Does that make sense? So,
Sure.
like,
That totally makes sense.
The value is you
but that's why I
protecting your
think if you're
value, but you don't need the women for that value.
Right, but I think that here's the entailment.
Yeah, sure.
So if you're prescribing, have sex with 50 women, okay, this is your prescription and the prescription has value, then whatever the hoes are that they're sleeping with, that's an entailment. So the hoe has to have value.
Not necessarily.
Yeah. Okay. Andrew's basically, and this is true. I don't know why Myron won't just admit this. You're optimizing around hoes. Therefore, by assigning a prescription to how to get hoes, you're giving value to the hoes, which is true. But only within the context of his advice. Like if I give you advice and prescriptions on how to rob a bank, it doesn't mean I think there's value in robbing a bank. I'm just telling you the prescriptions with the assumption that you want to rob a bank, right? So it's technically a hypothetical, right? So, but the point is, there's a differing of value systems.
Well, you could call them like pawns.
I mean, they would be necessary for you to sleep with 50 women, right? Right?
I mean, if you can
follow
get
that
by,
prescription.
if you can get by, right, with less, sure. But I think a decent barometer is 50 in today's day and age, because it will put you in a position where you'll experience a multitude of different girls with different personality types, different behaviors, different red flags, different green flags, etc. So you'll have a general rubric of like, okay, these girls that go to the club all the time probably aren't good. I've dealt with like 3 of them now. Okay, these girls that go to from a sorority and
Right, and I completely agree. I completely agree with Myron's advice. It's logically sound. It's very good advice if you're a secularist and you're trying to navigate secular women in short-term relationships optimized around sex. It's a differing of value systems. So Myron's advice is great. I have no problem with get some experience so you know which ones are crazy. But it depends on what kind of life you want to set up. And it's just, I don't think Andrew nor I wants to set up that kind of a life.
maybe not so good. So like you kind of have an idea of like, all right, this is you get a generality of things.
Well, so to like the olive branch, the meeting you halfway. I would not say for a second that the more sexual experience you have and the more worldly you are, that you're not going to have experience in dealing with worldly women. There's no doubt. Or women who aren't worldly. You're still going to have experience in both. All I'm saying is that I think it's a logical entailment to say, I'm going to prescribe that you go sleep with, let's just say it's 20, right? It doesn't even have to be 50,
Okay.
15, 10, 5. It doesn't matter. You and I both know the types of women those guys are going to be sleeping with are going to be easy women, and they're going to be low-value women. They're basically going to be hoes. So if that's the case, that the hoes are who they're going to be sleeping with, then we have now entailed that hoes have to have value, or else you couldn't sleep with them.
Wait, that's true. Yeah, okay. He's making a new claim, which is that, I mean, hoes are practice. Did we not know that, though? I mean, I feel like that's fairly obvious. Their value is that they're practice. I feel like that wasn't really a gotcha.
I think it's kind of a...
I mean, I think all women have inherent value, though, even hoes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, though. You're saying they're valuable.
Because like all females have some type of value because
Say practice.
because
Practice.
they're women. But as far as like attributing that value to yourself and taking her serious, I think that's a different thing. So you got to figure out which ones are, worth a relationship and which ones aren't. And I think the way to do that is through obviously
Now,
experiencing
from
them.
our view, from the Christian ethicist view,
Sure.
they have no value. They only have human value,
Okay.
but they do not have...
Well, you're ascribing value from different value systems. So the hoe is useful because she has value as practice, but the Christian doesn't view her as valuable because you don't need sexual practice. That's not a source of value. Something like that.
I would consider them at the lowest end of the...
If they're not virgins, like what
of the value
constitutes-
hierarchy. Women who are very promiscuous and they
Okay.
see sex
Fair.
as a tool or as a utility or as a manipulation device or things like this. Instantly, the Christian ethicist is going to look at this and say, this is completely sinful, needs to stop, you're totally valueless,
Yeah, fair.
right? Your humanity is still very valuable. You
Of
as
course.
a person still very valuable. Your salvation is really important to us.
Yeah.
But you're sinful.
I would disagree. I'm actually just going to randomly disagree with Andrew. I think there's nothing innately sinful for a woman to utilize her sexuality as a tool. There's technically nothing wrong with that because we can say the same thing about men in a relationship using their money and their worldly assets, their height, their wealth, their charisma, their utility, their skills to gain the affection of a woman, and there's really nothing wrong with that. So I would see a woman's sexuality as a bargaining chip that women can use to attract a mate. There's nothing innately evil about that. Where it becomes immoral is when it's not kept within the sacrament of marriage. So, I mean, I'm just going to just blatantly disagree and say you're allowed to have sex and you're allowed to utilize sex as a bargaining tool to obtain a husband. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's to be kept within the bounding box of marriage. That's where the morality comes into play.
This type of sinful behavior from our perspective is completely degrading to society, and we need to stop it by
Degrading? Or is it just degrading? I don't know.
almost any means necessary, because what ends up happening, it's like an enclosed system. What ends up happening...
Can you hear that? He sounds super nervous, bro. Can you hear the breathing in his mic? He is clearly... He hasn't had a cigarette in a while, you know what I'm saying?
Perspective is that degeneracy leads to degeneracy, leads to degeneracy, leads to degeneracy.
Okay.
I mean, who would ever have envisioned that this would be the world we live in?
Yeah, it's crazy.
But if you back it up, if you look at kind of the slippery slope argument, quote unquote, this started with an LGBTQ push for equality, and once they have
Started way before that. But yeah, okay.
Anything else to complain about? You have to move the goalpost to the next victim group.
Yeah.
Then you have to move the goalpost to the next victim group.
Yeah.
And it becomes more and more and more absurd. And that's why you'll see the pendulum eventually is going to swing back the other way by necessity.
I also disagree. I don't think there's any pendulum swinging any whatsoever, whatever. I think it stems from technology. I think technology is the underlying force that governs our reality because we adjust to the new technologies that exist within our world that did not exist before. And because technology is not going to magically reset one day, unless by some crazy miracle we lose all of our technology. I've seen those tropes in like games and films. I don't think that's very realistic. We're going to lose all our technology. That'd be pretty hard to do. And then the idea that someone couldn't reinvent half the technology, also not very realistic. But it's because of technology, and therefore we're not going to see a pendulum swing. And this whole like, oh, the pendulum has to swing the other way. No, it doesn't. There's literally nothing that demands there's going to be anything of a pendulum swing. So I was actually pretty weak on Andrew's perspective. I've seen him debate a lot better, but he was kind of weak in that debate, honestly, if I'm going to be honest with you guys. He tried to argue the Christian perspective to Myron, but Myron was just not really having any of it. He was just kind of regurgitating red pill talking points to Andrew. And Andrew didn't really have a good argument to come at fit for. So I hope he does better, because I was kind of weak. Honestly, I could probably debate the Christian ethic a little better. And the real problem at the end of the day with people like Myron is you're arguing to a secularist from a religious perspective, which is you can't really make appeals to the value of a hoe to someone like Myron, who views her as casual sex and as practice. And you can't take that value away from them. So you're trying to impose a Christian value system on people who don't believe in Christianity. So it's fundamentally not going to work unless you can appeal to something greater. So anyway, that's all for today. Take care.